model B or model baseline video if I'm feeling a bit more self-promotional, because when one Googles model V, other things come up. So what I'm doing is, in order to explain model B properly using ESFJ as a reference type, I'm writing it up on a ADHD friendly typewriter. And so what I'm doing is I'm describing, so for example, on here I've already done differentiated dominant extroverting feeling in the FESX, the FES, the collaborator guardian. And so I've described the core FE, assertive FE subfunction, creative FE subfunction, and the harmonizing subfunction. In applying DCNH, from one of the reasons I came up with subfunctions is that I'd always known there were three definitions of SI. The Jungian definition, subjective sensum, socionics definition, comfort sensum, and then sort of an algorithmic, so it manifests with an instinct to habit kind of thing that you get in Berens and Nardi. Cautious protecting sort of thing. So there's sort of like three parts of the truth. And so I went through the subfunctions and I thought, when I looked at the normalizing definitions, I realized that some of the core definition was going in there, and it was sort of repeating the assertive, but it wasn't as assertive. And they also started to think, hang on a minute, really this normalizing is really a way for socionics to see guardians, especially in concrete types. So I thought I'll take out the normalizing and just have those three: assertive, creative, stroke imaginative if it's an introverting type, harmonizing. So, and I've done FE, I've done SI, quite a lot on SI. So I'll hold that up to the camera. That's your SI for FESX, and I'm going to be boiling that down and doing it in a CG graphic for FESX. I should have put it on screen. My preference is coming through. So model baseline. See if I can get this on screen. Actually, should have put this on screen, but I don't know if it's good enough yet. I'll put that on. What have we got here? Yeah, I'll put that on. It's just my rough stuff. Rough stuff. Right. See a little bit of, because of INVIT, baseline integrated typology, its functions are used within the context of temperament. So what this means, this baseline integrated typology, is that my type images are not some wacky type images. They are pretty much the same as the Kersey, Berens, Nardi types, but they're just explained with extra stuff. They're consistent with those types. These are not new types. So anyone coming from, it's not, I'm not asking people to change their type images. It's not like, oh, it's a completely different system. It's adding on a solid base. So it's like, so if I'm making stuff up, it's consistent. It's consistent with what is known. And so it's not going to contradict anything that you already know. So what else have we got? We've got the, imaginative and harmonizing SI. So you can see it's sort of like fleshing out the subfunctions. And so I aim to do about one subfunction a day for ESFJ or core. So as you know, so you get 4 times 8, 32. So then I'm going to boil that down and put that in the computer graphic. What's the next one? I think the next one's SE. But then in the position, And then you've got here, I did this recently. There you go. My own date system, 3V. Third month of the proper year. Start the year, 1st of March, first day of spring. Then September's the 7th month, septuplets. October the 8th, December the 10th. It all makes sense. And even November with non. You've got a nonagenarian and nov, and enia with the n in that for 9. Anyhow, enough of my quirks. So this, by using subfunctions, and yes, I've still got to do creative and harmonize them. So the harmonizing is probably going to come about. Now, one of the reasons I did ESFJ is I wrote a profile for Arena character. And so that character has already been written out I used a certain proprietary Enneagram system that I cannot mention. Right, but an example of the Rena character, again, he's ESFJ resembler. Hang on a minute. Would I use that? Have I got to put the SE? It should be in there, shouldn't it? Why is that like that? Oh, it's because I've got the sheet over there. Somewhere else. Oh yeah, it was about the preference being that, but it was about how harmonizing. Hang on a minute, that's Wilma, Meta Wilma, rather than anyhow. So it was about how you've got like the guardian preference to sort of like be prepared and scheduled, but ESFJ can still adapt to circumstances, and so that adapting to circumstances, that's the harmonizing part of the extroverting instinct, where it's like, and so you can see that with artisans. So it's like, it's not to have a stereotypical view of artisans as blood and guts, which is the way socionics tends to go to. It just focuses on force and sorrows. Well, it's more than that. There's a creativity towards artisans, and Kersey pretty much concentrated on that, and even wrote that the reason why he talks about artisans so much is that he thinks he can help those more than any other temperament. So you got the force and solid stuff, and probably all that stuff that's involved in the criminal element that he noticed amongst violent criminals. But there's a creative aspect there to art. I mean, the vast majority of thespians are going to be ESFP. And then you've got the adaptive aspect of artisans, where they're good in a fluid situation and thinking on their feet. So you get all of these parts of it, and this is what. So the subfunctions are aimed to capture what you see at the whole type level, rather than making stuff up. It's capturing what's there. I can always say I'm not making something up. Is that, yes, it's being put into a structure, but it's like, this is what I notice, and what's in say the Kersey profiles as part of the temperament. Because, for example, adaptability, artistry, audacity, adaptability. You've got all three there. Artistry under creative SE, audacity under the assertive SE, and the adaptability under the harmonizing SE. You've got the harmonizing subfunction of SI. Right, the guardians here. Attempted to the physical needs of others. And again here, Amos Burton. He's SFJ. There's no doubt about it. An artisan is not going to say that here, bad ones, those you follow. Artisan's not going to want to follow anyone. I mean, not unless it's like a specific role model when they're younger. Like it might be a particular sporting figure. And then you go, those you protect, those you follow, bad ones. So it's like you've got like this extroverting judging, because like artisans don't like to like say, oh, that's a good person, that's a bad person. It's like, oh, that's a person that acted in those circumstances, and it depends on the situation. Whereas your FJs, maybe SFJs with that NE and generalizing, get out there with a character judgment, bad ones. Again, those you follow, that's like very guardian, and with E6 in there, and those you protect. So he's SFJ. And then here overlaps with instinct self-preservation. Right. Listens to its body. This is the Socionics comfort sensor. This is in the Kersey descriptions of guardians, especially SFJ. That's why he writes that he wrote the SFJs are conservators, and he wrote the ESFJ is predisposed to the provider supplier role. This is personality terms. And then ISFJ to the provider protector role. And that most medical doctors, most GPs, most nurses are guardians. So comfort sensing is in the Kersey type image. The imaginative, not so much, because it's very internal. And like I said, you got to ask them about their experience of reading novels without leading them too much. Get them onto the subject of this description and what they like, and they tend to like rich sensory detail. Why? Because they can imagine it very well. Also, what I've noticed, they like mental imagery, so they like the kind of jokes that have mental imagery. Artisans tend to a bit more like wordplay and slapstick, whereas guardians might like mental slapstick, where it creates a funny image in the mind. Mental image is a key to many different types of humor, but mental imagery is a big part of it. Right. So subfunctions. So this is going to take a while to do this, and so I mean that's already like, I mean that's just up to the third function and the first subfunction in it. So this could like easily be like 8 sides, and then I've got to boil that down into the graphic and populate the graphic. Then when I populated the graphic, then I'm going to boil that down to do the whiteboard video, which I'll try and get under half an hour. Then I'm going to do the coconut shell, as in a nutshell, it's just coconut sized. Then I hope to do a series of 8 videos with some ESFJ resemblers. And then I'll move on to the next profile, which might be, I might do INTJ, because there's a lot of interest in the INTJ videos, relatively on this channel. And well, there's a character that I'm going to write the profile for, and when I'm writing the character profiles, I'm using some Enneagram stuff, and I'm using Model V as well, describing the characters on using subfunctions as well. Oh yes, something new. PLESP planes. So maybe I can try and show the Victor Galenka ones. I mean, I'll put the other one up. Model V profiles, not done the type right. Skeletal. It's skeletal at the moment, and I'll populate it. So PLESP planes. So I was going through Victor's, because you know, there's a lot of good stuff in Victor, but you know, he's got his subjective thinking and I've got my own. So, and I can get a bit pedantic on a sort of a Jungian level. Oh, that's a Oh, that was a good thing in the corner. What was that? Have you liked, commented, and subscribed? Get down there. Right. Get back there. Should I go into modest mode? Let's make that a little bit bigger. Yeah. Or would you like me back? How would I know? Oh, narcissist mode. Right. I'll make it a little bit bigger. So with the PLESP planes, so Victor's got the PIPS planes, and I'm thinking physiological, good. Right, really you've got, I don't like the term body language because language has a grammar, right, and it's affect display, because part of affect display is tone of voice, and that doesn't get put into body language. That isn't a language. The only body language that there really is when it's a cultural gesture. Then it's that specific to a culture. Then it's part of a language. So there's a V sign would be part of a language. It's significant. There's semiotics there. I'll do more videos on that in future. So what else? Slightly less. Oh yeah, slightly less. So affect display. Because part of affect is it's in the voice as well. So you can notice that in ISTJ resemblers. Contender guardians. Especially in England, they have a kind of sort of a voice, a sort of a flat affect to their voice. So there are physiological. So the physiological, that's also going to be in the P.L.E.S.P. So what you're going to have, what do people do when they're in an NE state? And the eyes are going all over, and you can see ideas appearing in their mind, and it's like you see they're coming up with stuff on the fly. There's ideation. It's like ping, ping. You can see the thoughts just appearing in their mind. It's like that's a physiological correlate of NE moments. NI moments. You might have, like, say, like going into a slight, not just like staring off into the distance. It's like, oh, they're not quite there. Some moments like that. What a good way to think of. They'll have like an NI, so they're staring off into the distance. All right, and that's if you're with them. And then physiologically, SE, we see the attention directed completely outwards. NLP terms, uptime and in time. In this specific moment, physiological correlates. There's also stuff with other stuff with affect. If someone's in an FE state, again, there's affect. TI and T is trickier. So again, you don't have to sort of like pretzel it so that be truthful. It's not like there has to be a physiological correlate for each function, except, okay, these functions have these physiological correlates, and maybe we could do it on subfunctions as well. So it's like body language. So there's certain things in socionics where they say that static. Look at Shayna Baszler, the way she walks. She walks like a panther. It's like actually extroverted instinct and assertive subfunction. So you can do the physiological stuff. And again, you don't have to pretzel it and say there's one for every, which is where voltology goes too far. You don't have to say, oh, that's a look at TI, that's a look at TE. No, it's like just be conservative with it in the affect display, what you can get from affect display in certain states. So maybe you could say it's the irrational functions. So, I mean, physiologically, so then you could argue about, okay, what does SI then look like? Then you might say, okay, let's look at some behavioral things. So, and then we've got linguistic stuff. Well, look at the speech of NE, tangenting all over the place, and the associative speech of guardians, where it's tangenting and random seeming and random associations, but it's on a concrete level. So that's consistent with B-side NE, or you could say super id NE. And then we've got the correlates from Dario Nardi, you've got the EEG, so you've got the P, the LE, and then you've got the social and the psychological. So what I've sort of taken from Victor is the physiological, the social, and the psychological, and I removed the intellectual plane because, well, you moved into the sphere of thought. It then becomes a different function. If you say on the intellectual level something, well, for me, you've moved into the sphere of thought. You blended the function with thought. You're no longer describing the pure function. So I prefer not to have the intellectual plane. Look, you move from one sphere into the other, and that's, you have a sort of a systems, natural systems, organic systems approach where it's like these functions will blur together. And be honest when it does blur. Okay, that's not operating in isolation. That's a blur on. And yeah, something I got from Vanderhoop about when you move from one sphere into another. So, for example, if you recognize an object or a word, well, that's within the sphere of sensations, but as soon as you recognize it, that's perception. And perception is within the sphere of thought. And also when you recognize something, you're also within the sphere of like, that is this fits in a particular category, and category is related to thought. What is like, oh, what's that thing? And you recognize something, oh, that's a screwdriver or whatever, and it's like, oh, what is a screwdriver for? It's a category of objects. So you place it into a category of objects, and what that category of objects is for, that's involved memory, that involves what a concept is. So when you recognize it, you've gone, the act of perception, you've gone from, that is it. As soon as, so Carl Jung would say sensing tells you what it is. No, it doesn't. Thought tells you what it is within the field of sensor. The sensing is just the raw material. So you've got the perception, then you moved into the sphere of thought, but it's non-verted thinker. It's, well, it would be subjective if you categorize it. Say, like what we're doing, like, it's like, if you then categorize it according to your own system, TI. Now, arguably, you could say it's TE if it's going towards a category which is accepted and consensus. But you can see there, perception is a process related to thought. And also, when you recognize what kind of object it is, or if you say you learn another language and you recognize a word, what does that mean? Well, there's memory involved there. It's a particular kind of memory, semantic memory. So what have we got? We've got, so I'll do more videos in future on a particular subject that enables me to say these things about perception. Or even when you listen to me now, if you are an English dominant and you are perceiving there's the sound of my words, but also what they then mean. We're going into the sphere of thought. And also within the sphere of thought, this is signs. You've got semiotics, you've got destabilization, you've got, if you look at Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, I think it was Roland Barthes. I think it was Roland. Was it? Was it Roland? Yes, it was Roland. So you get the most French 20th century philosophers, and you get towards a postmodern approach, which is where I'm coming from, which is where I'm like, no, thought is not external. You know, it's not a case that sensing, and thinking are infallible, and that intuiting and feeling need to be interpreted. No, thought needs to be interpreted. You have to interpret what I'm saying. I'll give the example. Wojtek and I have a different definition of empathy. Right. So this is linguistics. This is semiotics. This is, oh yeah. So it was Saussure came up with semiology, and then you've got, well, something would translate to that in English, and then Charles Sanders Peirce, spelled Peirce, came up with semiotics, and he had, yeah, that's it. The representamen, the object that it was referring to, and then here's the key idea, the third part of that triangle. And I've forgotten it. Oh yes, the interpretant. The interpretant. But it's like you've got the interpretant is a little bit like the signified, but here's the thing. The interpretant is another representamen for another interpretant, and then that interpretant is one for another interpretant. So it's a little bit like when you look at the definition of a word in a dictionary, where you've got other words there that need to be defined, and it can sort of go on ad infinitum. And so you can see that within words, this sort of captures this idea of the empirical factor and the subjective factor. So people roughly have the same understanding of words, roughly, that enables us to communicate as a society and get things done. It's not completely random, but also you can tell that it's not one-to-one complete transfer of 100% meaning of one person to another. I think it was Jacques Derrida's idea of slippage within communication. Similar ideas on language with Wittgenstein. So, I believe when somebody talks in socionics and says that thinking is external and doesn't need to be reinterpreted, I think that's intellectual abuse. Right. Right. So more on P.L.E.S.P poems. Yeah, I took out intellectual level. EEG correlates. So again, we can see this, like, so the people who attack functions, you can say, well, you know, we've got some correlates going on. The linguistic correlates. See some of the videos I did with Carol Linden, like communicating with, one of the kind of things FE DOMs would say, what would appear in the language? What would appear in the, so Jeff, ESFP resembler, he would say one of the things that you get with intuitives, ask how long they're going to ask a what if question. And then there's something that correlates to intuition. It's not the same thing, because you can get certain ENTP resemblers out there who are not coming up with stuff on the fly. So intuition is related to the abstract, instincting is related to the concrete. So, and then you have to be careful with this and look at the context in which someone speaks. So it's like, so then think, is this a well-educated, concrete person who's just using the lingo of the subject that they're talking about? So for example, you can have a well-educated, concrete person who knows a lot of typological systems in depth, and they're using a lot of abstractions, doesn't make them an intuitive. It's then you got to look for preference to see how they're using the language. What is their motivation? Is it going towards further ideation, or are they using these ideas as tools? And so it then comes through as, are they using it towards application? And then you can sort of see not so much the use of abstract, concrete, but within that speech, can you see the preference for intuiting and concreting, or abstraction or concreting? So there is that link between intuiting and abstract speech and instincting and concrete speech. So there are these linguistic correlates to functions. So what else? PLESP, PLESP, physiological, linguistic, EEG, see Darionardi, social. So for social, now the hardest one is going to be psychological. Right at the end, you're going to have to use introspective data, as Van der Hoek would call it, for that, and like proper deep conversations with people. So it's like, what is your own experience when you're in like an FI state? How does it appear psychologically? I mean, if you write, you can know, you can sort of go, okay, I'm in this state of imaginative use of FI here. I'm putting myself in the center of a character as that character, not as yourself in their shoes. That person there, an individual in that person's shoes, not as yourself, but as that person in that shoes. And then other kinds of FI. What are the psychological features of that? These internal features of being in that state. What is the internal experience like? Again, so it's that's to be like the internal experience, and you're going to have to use introspective data for that. So it's going to be easier for introverts to get an idea of the psychological level for that. Also, certain functions might manifest in certain ways in the kinds of conversations with people, and it's like the psychological level of FI, and we're going to get something in there on a subjective feeling of connection with people based on perception of similarity of character, identification. So my definition of empathy is very much influenced by Robert McKee. It's a very FI definition of empathy, in that it's about audience identification. So, for example, you might have, George Costanza, eventually, thinking about it a little bit, I think, bloody hell, Jeff is right. George Costanza is an INTJ. And it's like INTJ 6, and I sort of identified a little bit with the George Costanza, when he was written properly, when Larry David was on the team. And it's like I identified with that character. So that connection, because of the similarity, that is part of FI. And you can even have it with ESTPs though. Where an ESTP who, say, the ESTPs, an ESTP teenager watching, say, Homicide: Life in the Street, and they see sort of Mike Kellerman in his first couple of seasons as like, okay, you've got an accomplished ESTP-like character. They're going to identify with that character. And the body language is like EJR&D. It's quite a good job there by Reed Diamond. It's a good actor to make an ESTP sympathetic, or actress in Katie Sackhoff's case with Starbuck, Car Race. What else? So not only that, can you define the functions with the P.L.E.S.P planes, but also subfunctions as well. So yeah, but again, you're not going to be able to do it for all the functions and all, but it's like all these extra little clues and all these things that bind up. And I haven't written it out yet because it's going to take a long flipping time, and I'll just talk about it. Oh, he must be an extrovert. No, he's ADHD. So I will finish ESFJ, and then I'm going to try and get those videos done. But I'm also going to be working on character profiles for a project. So that's going to maybe slow down my output, but I'm going to try and keep the quality high with the typology videos. There's also going to be some self-indulgence in there as well, and they're going to continue to be a weekly weekly reviews of old school TV. 13 more weeks of Kappa 2, and then we're back to Man and Machine. About 5 more weeks of that. So you got about 20 weeks of old school sci-fi reviews. Right, anything else? Physiological, you've got your affect despair. Oh, I've not talked about social. So, this is where Kersey comes in with his intellects. So, you've got, I'm going to put it on screen. I'm going to put the bit on from Stephen Montgomery. New tab. Jungian compatible. Is he his own folder? Yes, he's his own folder. He's not in the Kersey folder. All right, I'm going to put a little bit on about this. There's something that Montgomery did that I actually think was a good change. So, a way of thinking about how idealists are cooperative, and that is to ask, it's this what works versus what's right kind of thing, rather than utilitarian cooperative. Because, you know, let's say we've got like an Enneagram 4 fixation. Like, but that's the thing, it's like what's right. So it might be what's right in their opinion, but they're going towards what's right. Because like NFPs can do things in their own way, but it's like what's right. Well, what kind of right? So again, follow up. Right. What we got here? Then we've got some. Apparently he had INTJ. Am I sharing that? Yes. He had INFJ preferences. Contender idealist. So this is David West Kersey's son-in-law. So again, ingenious and theoretical and just. Intuitive and fervent. Right, so here. Now this is what I mean about the social plane. So, what does the function look like? Well, usually the function is paired with something else. So, what does TI look like? Well, it depends. If it's paired with NE, organizing the design and construction of evolving projects, structural logic, or organizing, development. Don't call it intuition of time. What's better than intuition of time? Intuition of development. You're coordinating resources towards long-term strategic objectives. That's your social plane of TE with NI. What does TE look like in Guardians? You are monitoring procedures, enforcing standard operating procedures, inspecting goods. You have TE with SI. And the SI part is the instinct to habit, the instinct towards an authorized way of doing something, towards a set standard, towards stabilizing the situation. And then there's TE in that context. So think of functions used in the context of temperament. What TI in STP is, well, it's to a tactical advantage. Now, this can also be, say, in the workplace, in that you can have artisans using TI in a way that some of the job's going to define it. So you can get like ISTP coders, like look up Solabok, YouTuber Solabok, CELEBOK. So, but again, there's more expediting, it's more tactical, it's more short term. So there's a predisposition towards the expediter roles, and so TI in NTs, so TI, and this is why I talk about NT functions. So TI within the context of the NT club functions, NE, NI, TE, TI, is going towards constructing. So you've got coordinated and constructing. TI within the context of STPs, TI with SE, expediter. It's more tactical. Making moves, make moves that get quick results. Improvise in the moment to promote enterprises, handle emergencies, and to help people have fun along the way. So the key there is, so how does that correlate with TI? Subjective, utilitarian, do things their own way. All the TPs are utilitarian. TJs are not necessarily utilitarian. So I would say that the TPs are double utilitarian. The NTJs, they'll use TI, they'll think their own way. But the NTPs, the focus for the NTJs is to do things like the best way, the most efficient way. By default, the NTP will want to do it their own way, just out of pride of just doing it their own way, of the pride of ingenuity. Whereas the NTJs are going towards, their focus of attention is towards the bottom line. So they don't mind doing it the authorized way if they agree with it. So the NTP might be, oh, I agree with doing it like that, but I think I can do it better. Oh, I'll do it my own way instead. So again, and that's the preference coming through. And the NTJ is looking at the NTP and it's like, you're just reinventing the wheel. Why are you wasting time? You know, again, it's pride in the ingenuity. There's more of a practical kind of efficiency with, and also there's like 3 different kinds of efficiency that I won't get into. I will. Like, so the NTP is maybe looking like for the ultimate design. It's like eventually get it ready in about 20 years. And the STJ view of efficiency is, well, if you do it by the book, you're not going to make mistakes. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then different views on efficiency. Oh, yes. And then the efficiency of STPs is towards a quick fix. Right. Because it might be, well, what's efficient is to get it done in the time. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As part of that thinking. So these then correlate to, these intellects correlate to predisposed social roles. And again, so again, you're looking at the function use on the social plane, social roles. And I'm going to put up, okay, Jung compatible. I remember Wojtek said INTP problems when I thought, should I put the Kersey in the Jungian folder? I thought, ooh, it's not quite the same. It's like, but it is Kersey compatible though. Right. Okay. Kersey David. Personology. Miscellaneous scans. He says with a inflection. Where is it? There it is. I'll do the 4 basic roles. Wait a minute, not quite 4 basic roles. Let's have a look. Yeah. Share, Jasmine, that. Again, you might want to put what's right. That's the circumstances. Again, these are the. That's the intellect, diplomatic enabling, logistical safekeeping, strategic building, tactical manipulating. You shouldn't really like equate that with temperaments because, say, any temperament can do any of these. It's just where the preference lies. Preference leads to practice. Practice leads to ability. But someone's job might lead to practice as well. So you can get any temperament involved in science. And plus, I think science is, I agree with that it's someone else, that it's more ST, science. It's empirical. Yes, there's a theoretical part. So, oh yeah, that's a neat little table in personology if you want to freeze that. The SJ. NF, SP, NT. What else? I want to get the social ones. Oh, old school temperaments. Look at these Germans there. From Rechma, Spreyer, Adikis. Paracelsus. Oh, yeah. Like Theophrastus von Hohenheim. Right, that's him. Theophrastus von Hohenheim. He thought he was better than Celsus, this old scientist from antiquity. So he calls himself Paracelsus. What an ego. So here. Right. Yes, the totem. No, wait a minute. There's the animal there as well. Oh, the animal totem. Fox, beaver, owl, dolphin. So, economic, yeah, theoretic, religious, aesthetic. You see, like, through these various personologists, yeah. I put Briggs in there. I just thought she should be named after the mother. Right. Right. So, really should like trim that bottom off. It's like we don't really need it. It means I've got to zoom in every time. Every time I've got to zoom in. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Gwen view. I'm just going to trim that down. Ben, this is not the time. Right. In balance. Crop. Just make things a bit easier. Right. Trimmed. I should trim the top as well, but I won't do that now. So, role enactments. So, these correlate to functions. Now, sometimes it involves fish's water, aka modest servant. So, initiating supervisor. If you're supervising, so you are enforcing the standard operating procedure. Right? So the supervisor's coming in and it's like, you got to do it like this, pal. And also they can go, oh, you don't do it like that, you do it like this. So this is like a social benefit ring shift from supervisor to educator. And that's an video that's coming up in a couple of months. We're going to be doing, Kristen's going to be doing a brilliant presentation on how she's used applied social benefit rings in teaching. And that's going to be in super detail. I think she's possible creative subtype. Like she is applying these theories creatively. Right, and there's an example of the speech for somebody like Kristen. It's like, okay, she's using these theories. Like, to what end is she using these theories? What's the motivation there? And sort of like to try and get that, try and see that preference between intuiting and instinctive. So it's like, how does FE, so for example, how does FE manifest? Well, is it FE with SI or FE with NI? If it's with NI, one of the main subfunctions of NI, a main theme of NI is intuition of development. There's a correlate to that as well in Kersey. Speech of NFs is prophetic. So you're going to be relating to future development. Well, as opposed to present development or past development. But yeah, future development. So what does that then look like? Well, FE with NI, development. Well, developing people. That's part of the diplomatic intellect. So mentoring, guiding people. And then healthy and unhealthy versions of this. And then FE, or is it FE with SI? And what's SI going towards? Cautious protecting. So then it's like providing for the physical needs of other people. So there we've got a social correlate of the function. We have the social plane of FE, depending on what it's blocked with. Now you could argue it like this: FE with NI, or you could say FE in the idealist temperament that is predisposed towards diplomatic enabling, or FE within the guardian temperament, which is predisposed towards logistical safekeeping. So these functions used in a context of temperament. This is a principle I picked up from Linda Bowen's at the back of her book, Dynamics of Personality Type. Wittering on for 50 minutes. So TE with SI, again, supervising. So is there going to be one there? Ah, brilliant. NT is there. So TE with SI, how does that correlate? Going towards detail. Or TE with NI, practical thinking with intuition or development. So that's here, not there, there. Coordinating resources towards long-term strategic objectives, and it's proactive, it's a directive role. Again, that's mobilizing resources towards long-term strategic objectives. Arranging contingencies. So you can see the negativist aspect in here that correlates to ILI in S8 in Socionics, where you've got, they can see how things can go wrong, and so it's like, if A goes wrong, we do B. If B goes wrong, so these contingency plans. So it's with their sort of negativist outlook, and these are more positivist. It's that sort of works, that idea from Socionics. Sometimes it breaks down like ENFP is supposed to be negative and ENTP positive. ENFP negative, really? ENFP tends to be quite positive, and yeah. So got to watch out for that. It doesn't work all the while. And then I've done TI again, expediting versus TI constructor, TI with NE. But also sometimes the other it's the other NT function. So for instance, the ENTP, when they are like inventing, creating a prototype, well, you got TE involved. So it's the NT functions, it's the club functions. NT. NI-NE-T-T-I. It's within that intellect of strategic building that correlate that, or in other words, strategic building draws on the NT functions. Tactical manipulating draws on the it breaks down a little bit because it's not a club. You can sort of like take a bit from each one. It's like, so this would be STs. Like you got a little bit of supervising and inspecting. It's sort of going to do. I mean, crafters got to do a bit of inspecting. They got to inspect. The crafters got to inspect. Like, let's do ISTP stereotypes. Like modern stereotype coder. If you go mechanic, well, they have to inspect and they have to craft. Or let's do with, yeah, okay. Supplier. So ESFJ, very good in a social situation, or sometimes they have to entertain their guests. Right. So again, you've got the correlates there of, I'll make it bigger. I've written them down. The function. Now, sometimes Fisher's water is involved as well. So like I said, supervisor, you're going to get some SE involved. Collaborating supplier. Maybe some SE. Like if you like adapting to certain, maybe. Protector, maybe. This one, I would say with counselor, you might get a little bit of FI in there. A little bit of FI. Educate with them, maybe a little bit of NE with ideas like communication. Advocator. They do need a bit of FE, to advance the cause, champion the cause, be expressive with their when they're doing their SJW stuff. Advocating social causes, that's in an extreme. I won't say what kind of extreme that is, depending on the point of view. Oh yeah, that's from Jeff. Like compliant with group and or own ethics, so not adaptive. Right, and then done those. So there's your PLESP planes. So you can see functions on these, and as you say, this is not stuff I'm making up. Say in the comments whether you think I'm making it up and whether I'm going to stuff that's actually there. All right, it's consistent. So you can see there when I say intuition of development, it's consistent with look at the kind of development we got. Development of people, diplomatic enabling, development of people, development of objects. So it correlates. So social, plane, correlates are the functions used in a context of temperament. And then, as I said, with psychological, that's going to be the trickiest to do. And it might be easier for certain types to notice certain things on certain planes. So it's going to be hard for ESTP to sort of see functions on a psychological level, but ESTP would be good at seeing the certain things. They definitely pick up stuff in sort of physiological level. You could argue linguistic as well. EEG doesn't matter unless you've got an EEG machine with you. And then social as well, and sort of see the actions. Right then. So that's just my adaptation of the P.L.E.S.P planes into the PLESP planes. Right then. I'm going to end this broadcast now. Here we go. Toodle pip.